Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Dribble Drive podcast. I am your host, Austin Render. Co-hosting today, Dalton Shetler is out in LA, a little under the weather, so we have brought in, we're going to the bullpen, sixth man of the year here, Justin Gaard, going to join us from the voice of the Minnesota women's basketball team. Justin, thanks so much for joining us, man. How are you?
I'm great. I'm also a little bit under the weather too, but I'm not in like 70-degree weather to help me through it. I'm a little down on Dalton. You know, it's like 50 below here in Minneapolis. I don't know if people have noticed that. We're hoping we can defrost our plane to head to West Lafayette later. So I'm a little under the weather too, but it's February in Big Ten country. It's just kind of how it happens, right? So
yeah, I'm on the upswing of it, but we're all dealing with it. We have to talk for a living. Our vocal cords get tired. Our body shuts down. But
survive in advance.
Dalton gets to sit poolside today as he works through whatever it is he's working through. But
I am bummed though, Austin. I'm bummed because, as you know, I love listening to this show. Like I was kind of counting on having this for the plane ride. I was kind of counting on downloading it, a nice clean 45 minutes to 60 minutes, so you guys could tell me what's going on in the Big Ten. So I'm losing the content that I was planning to. I guess I'll have to find something else because I'm like your number one fan, as you both know. I love this show so much. So I'm just going to try to do the best I can. But I am a little bummed that I won't get to listen to it in the next 2 days to get me ready for tomorrow.
I'm so sorry. I hate to inconvenience you in that way. That plane ride from Minneapolis to West Lafayette won't be the same. But we really do appreciate you jumping on and. Let's start as we normally do here on the show with the AP poll. We do have one addition. The Illinois Fighting Illini have joined the top 25 at number 25. Michigan State stays put despite their loss. I think a fair staying put for Michigan State because they had UCLA on the ropes there. Yeah. Couldn't get it done. UCLA does drop 2 spots with their first loss of the season. Notre Dame and Texas jumped them. USC's up to 4. Ohio State kind of hanging around in that 8 spot. We got to talk about Ohio State. You were there courtside for the first of 2 wild games for Ohio State this week. And then Maryland drops down 4 spots after they were blown out at home by Nebraska. Should mention that we didn't do it at the top. Just give us a like and a download like Justin always does with our podcasts. And leave us a rating, tell some friends. As we head into March here, it's going to be big time for our podcast, so we appreciate you letting people know to be a part of our podcast. We are live every Tuesday, noon Eastern time on the Back Home Network YouTube channel. You can see our visual aids that we put along with the podcast. If you watch us on the YouTube channel, we're also available post live as well on that YouTube page and on Apple and Spotify podcasts. All right. Justin, I think we got to start, and I know you were working that day, but we got to start with USC UCLA because that was kind of the game, the game of the year in this conference. And my goodness, did JuJu Watkins put on a show in this game? 38 points, 6 of 9 from the 3-point line. Justin, there was a point the entire second quarter and the entire third quarter where nobody not named JuJu Watkins made a basket for USC. And yet they survived and they surged late and they beat UCLA. One of the more impressive victories that anybody has yet this season.
Well, and what was impressive about it from the JuJu standpoint is that she hadn't been playing all that efficiently. You know, Minnesota, I think, had her 1 of 10 in the first half when we were out there a couple of weeks ago. It wasn't like she was shooting the ball very well. She's obviously always going to get her numbers. And you mentioned we were in Columbus, but you'd be amazed to kind of bring people, behind the curtain a little bit. The second that the Gophers got on the bus after the Ohio State loss, pretty much everybody had at least one phone on Peacock watching that game. Like this was one of those games that everybody in the game was ready to watch and excited to watch. And just watching what JuJu did in that first half, it wasn't just the scoring and the shooting. It was the defending. It was the blocking shots. You've got Kevin Hart there. You've got Vanessa Bryant there. Like this, it was really fun from my perspective to see how people that are in the game, in the same league, quote unquote contemporaries of the teams, because don't forget about UCLA here, we're all about like, let's get on the bus, let's get our food. Tough loss to Ohio State, but we got to see what's going on in LA right now. It was just such a fun night for women's basketball to see that place packed, and they were obviously looking forward to that when we were out there. And JuJu is one of those players, right? When the lights are the brightest, as cliche as it sounds, like she knew the entire really sports world, because that led Sports Center. It led all the stuff on Fox later. Like, that was one of the biggest stories in all of sports that day. It was an incredible performance, and it's predictable. I know you guys have talked about it a lot on the show, that everybody was waiting. The ranking people were waiting for UCLA to lose, right? And I wonder what would have happened had UConn, boat race South Carolina. South Carolina probably would have jumped them as well. I'm kind of surprised UConn didn't. Everybody was waiting for UCLA to have a hiccup, and they went into the Lions' den there, and JuJu Watkins was ready to take the baton, at least for a night. It was a really cool experience to see all of that happen.
Yeah, and kudos to Peacock. They made it an event. They made it feel like a big game. I thought Zora Stevens did a great job on the call of making it feel like this is a big deal. And we need that in women's basketball. I said the same thing about the way Jason Benetti and Fox handled the Iowa USC game. I thought they really made that a big deal. And I thought Peacock did a good job with this one. And USC, just a team that, it's funny, they had some of their normal issues come up in this game, and they got off to such a hot start, and then UCLA kind of got their footing, and you're like, oh, okay, here comes the number one team in the country. Right. They've got it figured out. And despite USC shooting 33% from the floor, despite going 2 quarters without anybody other than JuJu making a shot, they had a fantastic fourth quarter. They outscored UCLA 24-8 in the fourth. And the big thing I've talked about a lot with USC this year is if they don't turn the ball over, they're a really good team.
Right.
9 turnovers in this game, which is a huge thing. You can't give UCLA easy buckets, and they didn't. They made Lauren Betts' life extremely difficult. They started with single coverage, started throwing digs at her as the game went on. They didn't ever put Kiki Iriafen on her. They kind of went with their bench players and a little bit of Rhea Marshall defending her. But I just was so impressed by their strategy, and do want to give a shout out to Clarice Akunwafo, who did a lot of the one-on-one with Lauren Betts and did a really good job. Now, Betts eventually got her numbers, 18 points, 13 rebounds, but she was just 5 of 13 from the floor. And it didn't really feel like she was all that impactful in this game. I don't know how you felt, Justin, but it felt like they kind of took her out of it.
Well, do you have her assist totals off the top of your head? Because that, to me, is kind of the separator with UCLA.
Yeah, I don't, but I'll have it in a second.
Because, like, when the Gophers were there, for example, Betts was taken out of the game. She had 11 assists. And the others, and by the way, when you say the others on UCLA, you're talking about McDonald's or Jordan Brand All-Americans, right?
Yes.
It's amazing how so many talented players are so overshadowed by, Betts, which is obviously earned. She's incredible. But when those players, you kind of have to live with either, you're going to let Betts beat you with some twos, maybe single her up. If you can limit the supporting cast, and Minnesota couldn't, I'm just using our example, and a lot of teams haven't. They were blowing out teams until the last couple of weeks. If the supporting cast doesn't really get theirs, you do keep yourself in it by letting Betts just go 2 by 2 by 2 by 2, especially if JuJu's going crazy, which she was. So it was an impressive finishing kick. You're right. When UCLA had kind of stabilized themselves, and I don't know if they just ran out of gas, if the also-rans didn't have enough, to go along with their All-American player, but it was really an impressive night, I thought, all the way around for the Trojans, who I think had kind of been forgotten about a little bit. Yeah. I think they'd kind of been forgotten about because of what UCLA had done, because they hadn't had any really like signature victories. They obviously lose to Iowa. They've kind of let teams hang around a little bit more than their crosstown counterparts. So I thought it was a big statement that, no, we're still here. Like, we're still here in our own town. We're still here in the Big Ten, and obviously they're still here when it comes to national championship contention.
Yeah, I mean, these two teams, each one of them are probably 2 of the top 5 in the country in terms of who you would pick to win the national title. And
we get to see them again.
Yes.
I mean, at least one more time. We might see it at Indy, too.
Probably for the Big Ten title at this point. Ohio State's 2 games back. Doesn't feel like they're going to make up that ground at this point. So that is likely going to be a de facto Big Ten championship game at Pauley Pavilion. 2 assists in that game for Lauren Betts, by the way, to 4 turnovers. We should also note, and as we transition a little bit into what UCLA did after this, they beat Michigan State. Lauren Betts was out in this game with a boot on her foot. I don't know if that impacted the way she played against USC, if it happened in the USC game, but she did not play in their next game. This was a grind, and they were up early, and you're kind of thinking, okay, even without Lauren Betts, this is still a machine. They're still doing what they do best. Kiki Rice is dominating. And then it flipped, and Michigan State, they can do that to you with that press. And you and I both have Michigan State still on our schedules here the rest of the way, so we still yet to see it in person. But that press, it's like Ohio State gets all the press for their press.
Right.
But Michigan State does it really well. And Theron Halleck and Nyla Hampton and these guards at the top of this press are so pesky. And they got them right back into this game. I tweeted it. I have frustrations with the way this game ended. I think it was Nyla Hampton who took the potential game-tying shot and got hacked.
Yeah.
Didn't call it. And then they tee up Robin Freilich, or I think they technically called it a bench technical.
Right.
I'm really anti-technical fouls in a situation like that in the heat of the moment for a coach to be angry about something and then for you to totally it ended the game. It ended the game right there, that technical foul did. Let's say you don't call the technical foul, UCLA goes down and misses one of the 2 free throws. It's still a 3-point game.
Right.
But by giving them the technical foul, they got 4 free throws, made them all game over.
Yep.
And I was disappointed in that because this was a really high-level basketball game all the way up until that point.
Yeah, I agree with you on how it ended. That's always how it happens, though, right? Officials blow a call, coaches go crazy, then the officials make it worse. And I'm sure they heard about it after, whoever is in charge, right? I'm sure they got a call and said, we got to keep cooler heads. Like, we blew that call because I agree with you. I thought she was fouled. Yeah. And the coach is going to be upset. That's where you just have to kind of take your medicine and go, we got to keep going. And it still would have been a long shot. If UCLA makes them both, it's over. But you mentioned Halleck. She was the best player on the floor for about a 3-minute stretch there. I mean, she got them back into it. I was watching it just like you, and UCLA is kind of comfortably in front, and that's always scary when it's like 8 with them, because 8 can turn into 18 in like 37 seconds, right? Yeah. A little different without Betts, obviously, but when she's out there, especially it can, because all of a sudden a couple of misses, a couple of threes, timeout, your favorite team, and the game's over. But Halleck, you could tell, was feeling it. Like UCLA called that timeout after her second or third three there in that stretch. They were getting the turnovers. UCLA wasn't making shots. And, yeah, they're dangerous. There's a reason why you guys have had them in basically the top 5 of your power rankings all season long, right? Yeah. They deserve it. And that defense is outstanding. Their pressure probably does not get enough press, as you said. And I thought for a minute there they were going to catch UCLA off the USC hangover. Yeah. And then obviously it didn't happen. But, yeah, when guards can make threes like that off of those turnovers, it's a scary proposition. And it was fun to watch Michigan State just – in that belly of the beast, just say, we're going to try to steal this one.
Yeah, Robin Freilich is a top 3rd, maybe top 4th coach in this league, probably top 4 to 5 coach in this league. And they talked about it on the broadcast. There was a close-up after the Theron Halleck turnover when they were down 2, inside a minute to go. She turned it over. They called a timeout. She comes over the huddle. And you could see Robin Freilich going like, hey, like, this is not verbatim, but you could tell she's like, hey, pick your head up. Like, there's still a lot of basketball left here. And right out of the huddle, right out of the timeout, Halleck gets the steal. And that stuff's so cool when a camera catches that perfectly. And she went out, made a play. Obviously, they don't get the win, but they could absolutely catch USC. Like I mentioned, USC has had turnover issues this season. And if Michigan State can speed them up, that could absolutely go the Spartans' way. So very curious to see where that goes. That's tomorrow night. Okay, so there's several games of the week. USC, UCLA, it was 1 versus 6. We always hope that a game like that's going to live up to the billing, and it did. Final score was 11, but that was a tight back-and-forth game the whole way. Game of the week, part 2, was everything Ohio State did this week. You were there for the first one. Ohio State 87, Minnesota 84. I'm going to be honest. Both of these Ohio State games, I turned off with about a minute and a half to go. Because I said, all right, Ohio State's got it taken care of. Next thing I know, we're in overtime. Like, what in the world just happened? So I went and rewatched it. And for those who didn't watch it, here's the play-by-play of the end of this game, just on the Ohio State side of it. Chance Gray turnover with 1:28 left. 2 Kennedy Cambridge missed free throws with 59 seconds left. McMahon turnover, 49 seconds left. Green turnover, 44 seconds left. McMahon turnover, 41 seconds left. 1 of 2 free throws from Madison Green with 18 seconds left. And then Gray misses a 3 at the buzzer, and they go to overtime. The Minnesota side of it was Grocholski got hot. They started hitting shots. You take us to the Minnesota side of that comeback, Justin, because this is not the first time Minnesota has done this. Several times this season, they've made this rally. Well, take us there to Columbus.
Yeah, they came back to beat Illinois, not quite as dramatically, but they were down 11 late in the third quarter in that game. They almost came back. I think they got it to within 3 at Maryland. It was like a 20-2 run, something like that. Yeah, they always play to the whistle, I guess, but that doesn't happen without help. And you mentioned the Ohio State side of things. It kind of happened against Iowa as well on Monday morning, where you miss enough free throws, just enough to keep them in, and then obviously you've got the shot making and the turnovers from the Minnesota and Iowa side to keep them in it. In the Gopher game, I think what helped them is that Jelani fouled out late. That's kind of their primary ball handler, and nobody really at the time thought anything of it because I think there was 71 seconds left, 80 seconds left, whatever it was. That you think you weren't the only one that turned it off. People were leaving in Columbus with 90 seconds left. Why wouldn't they be? But when you do kind of close games in a sloppy fashion, like Ohio State did, you allow teams to hang around. And it was almost an epic, mythic night, for the Gophers to come back from that and tie it up with 8 seconds left. Their turnover popped back up again in the overtime period. They had a critical one that allowed Ohio State to go up by 4, and that was kind of it. They had a shot to tie it at the buzzer of overtime that ended up getting blocked. But I think in both the Iowa and Gopher game, Ohio State gave the other team just enough life to milk everything out of that clock, and both teams did. They lived to tell about it, but I'm sure they're not super pumped about how those 2 games finished.
No, I mean, those were wild finishes to basketball games. And on the Minnesota side of it, a team that we're going to talk about here when we talk bubble, but Justin, I know you know this, that would have been a massive win for Minnesota. On the road, quad 1, would have been their first quad 1 win of the year. Massive opportunity. But for Ohio State, like you mentioned it, Jelani Cambridge goes out. Their like big blemish on the resume this year is the Penn State loss.
Right.
Jelani Cambridge did not play in that game.
Right.
And so you're seeing the importance of Jelani Cambridge, the head of the snake, so to say, for this Ohio State team. They didn't do it again against Iowa. Iowa got red hot. Guyton, Olsen, making a bunch of 3-pointers. Theme in both these games is Ohio State missing free throws down the stretch too,
right.
which is a big issue. But they dominated overtime more than they dominated against Minnesota. But I don't know what to make of it. Like Dalton and I have had our doubts at times not about Ohio State being a good team, but about the dominance of Ohio State.
Right.
And this was kind of jarring of, okay, you've got 2 teams that you should beat on your home floor, like dead to rights, and you let them back in the game. Like that's normally it's supposed to be the other way around with the Ohio State press that can get them back into the game.
Right.
But I don't know what to make of this for Ohio State. This combined with the 2 kind of not all that great performances in LA, and the committee came out with their first top 16 rankings, and Ohio State's a 4 seed. Like, where are the Buckeyes at right now?
It's a great question, and because the reason I think we're all confused by it is because they're so talented.
Mm-hmm.
That, even the players they brought into the portal or brought in from the portal, like Asia Petty, for example, from Kentucky. She's a player that we saw the last 2 years because the Gophers played them. She's essentially a double-double player that they just pluck out of the portal and slide in.
Yep.
I wonder at times if they almost live too much off of the press and the turnovers. That's how they built a big lead against the Gophers. And really my whole time doing this, that's how they've beaten Minnesota. Minnesota's turned it over 20 plus times. They've got 30 points off of those turnovers, and there's your ball game. When you were talking about USC earlier, when you take care of the ball against Ohio State, I don't know if they're the most locked in defensive team of all time. I certainly know they're not a very good rebounding team.
Yeah.
They get out rebounded which it seems insane given who they're putting out there and the talent that they're putting out there. So I just don't know if they're always locked in on the details like some of the other teams that live on the margins, like the team I cover, for example, that has to maximize everything they have. They don't have the same margin for error. I think they know oh, well, Cody McMahon's going to go get us 3 buckets in overtime. No big deal. And against the Gophers, McMahon was unbelievable, 25 points, and basically threw off multiple Gophers on the way to the rim a couple of times. And just a really good play by a really good player. Like, there's not a whole lot you can do about that. You can be in position. You can run exactly what you're supposed to do defensively. And Cody McMahon says, no, it's not going to happen tonight. The people that stayed here at the Schottenstein Center are going to see a Buckeye victory. And so, but I just don't know if they're, I think sometimes they know they're going to get 20 turnovers. They know they're going to get fast breaks. They know that they've got studs that are going to make plays. So I don't think they're always maybe locked in on, because that Penn State loss is the most surprising loss ever, even with Cambridge being out. It's probably the most stunning loss in the league all season, right? And we all looked at that and said, what happened there? I just don't know if they're as tight in terms of the details as every other team, because this stuff does seem to pop up for them more than some other teams that have their talent. And obviously Kevin McGuff's been there forever. He wins every single year. He's a good coach. So I don't know if that's the problem. It's but it is strange when you do the boards like we do. You see all the talent and the returning production that they have, and then you wonder why they haven't been able to jump up. Even losing at home last year in the NCAA tournament was a stunner. And I think that's because these little things get magnified the bigger the stakes are.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And we'll see. I was doing some prep because we've got them next here in Bloomington. And you're right. The rebounding margin is negative for Ohio State this year, and they're averaging just 32 a game in the Big Ten.
Right.
It's interesting for a team like you said. And Asia Petty has not been playing that great in conference play. So we'll see what we get from the Buckeyes here down the stretch. I think they're pretty firmly in the top 4 of the Big Ten.
Yep.
I think it would take a lot for them to fall. Now, they do still have Indiana on the road. They still have Maryland on the road. They have Michigan State at home. So it's not an easy schedule for the Buckeyes coming down the stretch. But as long as they take care of the business you would expect them to, they're going to be a top 4 team, get the double bye. The bigger question is, they were closer to the top 16 bubble than I thought they would be. Right. Being a 4 seed. So can they maintain that and get to host in Columbus? That's the bigger question moving forward. Jelani Cambridge was terrific in this game against Iowa. She was awesome. 29 points, got to the free throw line a bunch. She's just so hard to guard.
Yep.
If you don't, nobody has another Jelani Cambridge. So how do you keep her in front of you? Like, I mean, it's really,
she's
really
so good. She's so good. And our associate head coach, Jason Jeske, does a pregame interview with my partner, Lynette, and he basically said her top speed is faster than anybody else. Her 75% speed is faster than anybody else. Like, you have to find a way to somehow get her to really throttle down, because you can't run with her. You can't run with her once she gets a full head of steam. And you know how challenging it can be play-by-play wise when somebody gets an outlet at the three-point line and they're already in the other lane in like 1 second. You say, I haven't even cleared my throat. Nobody even knows Ohio State has the ball yet. And Jelani Cambridge is at the other foul line looking to make something happen. Like, she really, you have to be ready for, and that's off a make too, by the way. You score, they don't care. They're going right. She is wonderful. Like, what a fun player to watch in person, but an absolute handful and a problem to guard.
Kiki Rice is the one person I think of as, okay, she could probably go with her speed-wise. I'll be curious to see. I'm sure Indiana will put Chloe Moore-McNeil on her.
Yep.
Be curious to see how that matchup goes. Did get an email from our friend Dave, the voice of the UCLA women's basketball program, explaining the technical foul from a behind-the-scenes look here.
That's good.
He said that the cameras didn't catch. She came out. Robin Fraley comes on the floor to contest the lack of a foul call. She slammed her head into a clipboard, and the pen flew off and may or may not have hit Kyle Bacon, the official. If it didn't hit him, it sailed right by him. Somebody had to go retrieve it. It was closer to the UCLA bench than it was the Ohio State bench. So I don't know. Maybe there was a miscommunication there that they thought a pen was thrown at Kyle Bacon. Yeah. He was the one that teed her up, but
okay.
I still stand by. I don't like it, but I like Dave chiming in here with some behind the scenes.
Yeah, for sure. That does add something to it. You still don't love it. But and you do, the clipboard and the pen thing adds a little bit to it.
Headbutting the clipboard. Man, she was frustrated.
Well, you see Fred Hoiberg like cut his hand the other night for Nebraska men's basketball. He smashed a clipboard. These coaches, it's tough in February on these streets, man. There's a lot at stake right now. These
there is, and
men
there's
and women
a lot
are
of
losing their
stress
mind.
going on. Let's talk about my team of the week, and I think they did a lot to alleviate some of the stress of March, and that's the Oregon Ducks. Really big week for Oregon. Wasn't easy, but they squeaked by Washington 68-67. Unfortunately, again, we're talking about your Gophers on the wrong side of the score here, but 76-70 on the road at Minnesota in a game they kind of, I don't know about you, Justin, it just kind of felt like a game-long stiff arm of
Yes.
like, hey, we're going to keep you right here, and you're going to get to within 3 or 4, and then we're going to make a bucket. And I've always said that if you can score more than 60 points on Oregon, you've got a good chance of winning. Well, Oregon threw up 76 in this game and looked maybe one of the better performances we've seen from them. I do think they're a solid tournament team. Their net is still not as high as you might think it is, but I think Oregon did a lot this week to make sure that they will be dancing in March.
I was really impressed with them. And you're right. It was a game-long stiff arm. The Gophers had a 9-point lead. They started the second quarter on a 7-0 run. Oregon calls timeout. And then I mentioned the turnovers with the Gophers later. Oregon does like 52 different defenses. You never know what they're in. They're running and jumping. They're playing zone. They're doing a zone trap, the whole bit. And the Gophers just started kicking the ball around, and Oregon made them pay for it. They went on, I think it was a 17-2 run. It might have ended up being more than that. They went from down 9 to up 7. The Gophers hit a shot close in the final seconds of the half to get it to 4, but they could never really get any closer than that. They made another late charge in the fourth quarter, which, as we mentioned earlier, is kind of what they do. They dig in themselves in these holes and navigate themselves back. But I think what helps them is, obviously, everybody knows Deja Kelly.
She was terrific this week.
Really good. And that's what you expect, right? She's been around forever, all ACC player at North Carolina. I looked, she scored 15 points and had 4 assists as a freshman against the Gophers when she came here for North Carolina, my first year, a couple of years ago. And she was great. And then when you get, I think with all these teams this time of year, when you get production from people that you're not necessarily expecting to get it to, or get it from, when Mevius is perfect from 3, at least 4 or 5, I think.
4 or 5,
and she made her first 4. And then when she finally missed, I think they got an offensive rebound and scored. Whitfield being in double figures. Like, you're not expecting that, right? You think if we can handle Kelly, who they did for the first half, you're going to be in a pretty good spot. But those two, especially Mevius, separated. Oregon only makes 6-7 threes a game, and Kelly and Mevius was there almost on her own there. So that's unexpected. And then guess what? Deja Kelly, when it's closing time, had the ball in her hands the entire second half and was getting to the line. Her mid-range shot, she had a couple of shots, Austin, that you're just like, that's a WNBA player out there against college kids. Coming off the screen, stop and pop, off of a curl, rise and fire. Nobody has a shot to guard it. And so she deserves any player of the week accolades that the Dribble Drive podcast wants to give her, because she was outstanding against Minnesota. And you're right. Even Don Plitzowite said, you score 70, you think you're going to be okay against Oregon. That's not far off. They've held, I think, 16 of their last 17 opponents now to under their season average in terms of scoring. Gophers average about 75 a game, so technically they were under, but that's closer than I think a lot of us thought they were going to get, given what they'd done to other teams. But it was, they couldn't stop the Ducks when they needed to, and Kelly was a big part of that. She was really, really good.
I've said it. Eugene is where offenses go to die, and they have really suffocated teams. And the fact that they showed a little bit of a gear here to get to 76 points was impressive. And you never know who it's going to be for Oregon. You assume Deja Kelly is going to give you something. Is it going to be Peyton Scott? Is it going to be Elisa Mevius? Is it going to be Whitfield off the bench? Is it going to be somebody else off the bench? Is it going to be Philly Che? You never know. And that could be good and that could be bad. And for the most part this year, it has been really good for the Oregon Ducks. Give Kelly Graves a lot of credit, because that was an empty cupboard that he was working with and brought everybody in for the transfer portal and said, let's make this thing work.
Yeah.
And
it takes time to do that sometimes, right? To bring in all those players.
They were the worst team in the Pac-12 last year.
Right.
Like pretty decidedly. And they have jumped into the top 6 or 7 in the Big Ten this season. Very impressive. They're looking like they're going on to the NCAA tournament.
I loved what he said, by the way, to go all the way back to October. I brought this up a lot. You mentioned the transfer portal. I'm sure you remember this from Big Ten Media Days. He was up there with Terry Morin and one other coach in that roundtable.
Yep.
And they asked him about the transfer portal, and he said, Well, we've certainly been giving to it the last few years, so we thought it was the time. And Terry Morin's like, "Oh yeah, Sidney Parrish, no big deal." Like he said, we've certainly been giving to it the last few years, so we thought it was time maybe we grabbed from it. And yeah, Deja Kelly's worked out pretty well. I'd say that's a pretty good transfer for the Oregon Ducks.
You got Ducks all over the Big Ten. Sidney Parrish in Indiana, Chance Gray at Ohio State, Grace Van Sluten at Michigan State, and now a whole new Oregon team making things happen for the Ducks. Okay, so I want to use this. I'm going to flash score up. Illinois 77, Nebraska 68. Illinois is 11-4 in the Big Ten, and they are playing 6 players a game. Yep. And it's working. And I want to ask you this, Justin, because I think it's an interesting conversation to have now in late February. I don't think we get votes in this, but who's the coach of the year in this conference? Because Shauna Green deserves to be in that conversation with what she's done with this team.
Yeah, you're probably right.
It's probably Corey Close or Lindsey Gottlieb.
I think it should be Corey Close, I think.
Yeah, I think that would be my vote right now.
Yeah, I would probably give it to her. Dave, if you're still watching, you can email us, UCLA, we voted. I would probably give it to her. Shauna's got to be
in the top 3.
Yeah, for sure. And
it's incredible.
Yeah, I'm trying to even think who else would you put Freilich in there too. Although
I'd give Freilich and Blitzer-White nods at and Kelly Graves. I mean, those are all coaches that have done a lot with not as much as some of these teams at the top of the conference.
Right. It is interesting though, and you were I know on your rundown you had Kim Barnes-Arico becoming the women's coach at Michigan. Just that the stability on the coaching side that I love in the women's game, where you have, and I think Indiana's an example of that too, where, I don't think it exists on the men's side, and maybe it'll change in the women's now that the money's bigger and more eyeballs are on it. But, Terry Morin, first 4 or 5 years in Bloomington, not like a rousing success, right? Like building your program. Kim Barnes-Arico, same thing, like a couple early tournaments. Then all of a sudden you get a Naz Hillman. Then all of a sudden you go to a Sweet 16 Elite 8. Now you've got top, 10 recruits coming to your campus.
Yep.
I think it's just, Lisa Bluter's another great example, who just retired. She had a good run at Iowa, solid NCAA tournament program. Oh, here comes Megan Gustafson in like year 12, changes the program. And then Caitlin Clark, we all know, like the Big Ten is so good with these coaches, the ones that have been around for a while. And now the new kids, like Freilich and obviously like Shauna Green that are coming in and having their seat too. It's crazy, man. I didn't even mention Kelly Graves. We all know what he's done.
Yep.
It's just a crazy league for coaches, which makes sense. It's the Big Ten. It should be.
Yep.
But they're all just so dang good.
A lot of good coaching jobs. I mean, you could put 9 people probably in a conversation of, man, look at how good of a coaching job. Give Jan Jansen a lot of credit.
Totally.
Because they were struggling. 5-game losing streak. They're 2-6 in the conference. And then they rattle off 6 in a row. And they go to overtime with Ohio State on the road. That's their only loss here in the last 2 months. So
right.
Give them a lot of credit as well. Illinois, just people playing minutes on minutes on minutes. Like Bostic and McKenzie not coming out at all in the Penn State game. The bench is barely – I mean, you got Barry Wallace, and then that's pretty much it.
Yep.
And Corey Allen will play a spare minute or two if they need her. Give the players a lot of credit too, because A, their stamina has to be really good, but B, they're not getting in foul trouble.
Right.
And that when you have 6 players that you can essentially play in a game, I'm imagining that's Shauna Green and her staff's biggest fear is what happens if Kendall Bostic gets in foul trouble. And they really haven't had to deal with that.
No.
And we talked about a couple episodes ago, like how sustainable is this for Illinois? I don't know. I don't know if this can work in the NCAA tournament, but they're going to be there. Yep. And they're going to be – I don't know how they're going to fare in L.A. That's a big thing this week is I'll be curious to see how competitive they are with these Los Angeles schools. But can they be a tough out in the Big Ten tournament? Absolutely. Can they be a tough out in the NCAA tournament? For sure. I don't want to play Genesis Bryant. I don't want to play like Barry Wallace is playing with so much confidence right now. Adalia McKenzie's playing great. Jasmine Brown-Hager is giving them some really good minutes. And you tip your cap. When we played Illinois in Bloomington, they were 2-3 in the Big Ten, and they came into Bloomington and blew the Hoosiers out of their own gym. And you're like, man, that was really disappointing. Like, I can't believe we just played like that against Illinois. And here we are. They've lost 1 time since then. They're arguably the hottest team in the conference right now. And you're like, gosh, man, that team is good. That's the best. That's the hang your hat win right now for your Gophers.
It is.
The win against Illinois.
They're getting a lot of run out of that too.
Yeah.
Because, Indiana's probably their second best win.
Yep.
So they're getting a lot of run out of that. That's probably keeping them on the right side of the bubble right now. You're right though about Illinois, and I think you'll probably agree with this. I thought Illinois was a disappointing story a year ago. I think expected more out of them. They got off with everybody that they're bringing back. McKenzie's the one that was there as a freshman my first year, and obviously their coach gets fired. Shauna Green comes in, brings in the reinforcements. They've all been there ever since. So they've got the experience, they've got the talent, they've got the experience playing together. And I felt like Shauna Green was speaking directly to the Dribble Drive podcast after their most recent win. I don't know.
I think she was. I watched this.
Yeah. So Coach Green, thanks for watching. Because she basically said, "Keep telling us we can't do it." Right? Am I paraphrasing it right? She said, "Keep telling us. We love it. We love it." Austin and Dalton. I felt like
look. I want to tell Shauna, we're not saying that you can't do it. I just had my doubts about how long can you do this, but they keep proving me wrong. So I guess I'll keep sitting here and saying, is it sustainable?
Yeah,
because they're using that as fuel.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the fact that they're so experienced helps them. I would be shocked if they're, running a lot of practices that go over 60 to 75 minutes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you hear NBA coaches talk about all the time, and really any college coach at this time of year, you're not practicing all that much because everybody's beat up, everybody's tired, everybody's, ready for, February is such a tough month for everybody.
Yeah.
You're maybe doing a shoot around the day before, you might be going hard on some concepts, but these players know what they're doing, right? And they know what they're doing in this system. They've all been in it forever. So I don't think, you're running for turnovers in practice at this point of the year when you've got this experienced of a group. So that's probably how they get their rest, and they're ready to go for game time. And it is amazing to watch. And like I said, it's a good bounce back for them from off a year ago where I thought they should have been a no-brainer tournament team. And that's life in the Big Ten. Sometimes you have a couple of bad weeks and it's over for you. And then they got off to that slow start, like you mentioned. But, they are absolutely dangerous. And they all know their roles, right? Because they're all going to play. If you're out on the floor, this is what we expect of you. And you can't argue with the results right now.
They are rolling right now. And on the flip side of this matchup for Nebraska, this is off the heels of a 91-71 road win at Maryland. I think Nebraska also listens to the Dribble Drive podcast because Dalton and I had an intervention for them last week. What's going on in Lincoln? This team doesn't look good. They've lost 3 straight games by 15 or more. And this was one of the more puzzling results of the year to me as I'm watching it. And it's just continuing to balloon. It got up to 28 at one point.
Yes.
You're like, what is going on right now? This is wild. And Nebraska played so well. And I give them a lot of credit. And they came out. Now, they didn't win at Illinois. The big thing for me right now, Justin, with Nebraska, Britt Prince's injury.
Yep.
How severe is that? She could not put any weight on the ankle. She landed on somebody on a 3-point shot late at Illinois. Interesting that wasn't a technical foul because I thought that was the new rule that was brought in. If you land in the landing zone and somebody twists their ankle on you, I don't know. I don't know how that's all supposed to be adjudicated. But for Nebraska, very interesting finish to the year for them because it is friendly. It's Oregon, it's Washington at home, and then I think they finish at Northwestern. So with a healthy Britt Prince, you feel like they can win all 3 of those games.
Right.
If they don't have Britt Prince, that's your playmaker on the offensive side of the floor. As good as Alexis Markowski is, your playmaker is Britt Prince. Ball's in her hands. And I'm curious to see where they'll go from there. But I do think they're listening to this podcast because earlier this year I challenged Markowski, and then she went and put 28 on Michigan State.
Yep.
And then we challenged them last week, and they go and they win by 20 at Maryland.
Yeah, they're a confusing team too. And I know we're going to talk about 5-12 in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
I think, and you and I have talked about this on the show before, it just feels like the football season all over again for me. That 5-12 for football, it was basically 5-14. It was just any given Saturday who played well. It's, I think, exactly the case for basketball right now, which is good. It's fun. Every game's entertaining, but it's also, you feel like if you're in that middle, you can't get any momentum. Illinois has kind of separated themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And the Nebraska thing has always been puzzling because I always feel like because of Markowski and obviously with Prince coming in there, and we know Potts being injured is a big deal for them. And the fact that I watched them just blow the Gophers out of Pinnacle Bank Arena in December in the first Big Ten game for both, I'm always like, feel like they should be better. But then I have to check myself. Well, who are they replacing? Who are they going to replace in the top 5 or 6 of the Big Ten? That's the tricky part. But you're right. The results, though, were very confusing to lose when you have that much talent. And Amy Williams is a great coach, and now she's been there a while. So you saw the jump that they made. And I know Jazz Shelley's not there anymore, as important as she was to the team. But that was the score. I think they were down 10 early to Maryland, too. I think.
Yes. Yep,
and so that was one where you're doing the scoreboard update at halftime and you keep hitting refresh, assuming that the Wi-Fi, something has gone wrong. Like, wait, Nebraska's up by 28 now? How did that happen? They were just down 10 in College Park. None of that makes any sense, but I do think that's life in the middle of the Big Ten. And then you look at the numbers. Well, yeah, if Markowski goes for 20 and 11, they're probably going to go it's going to go well for them. If, Rimdahl, not always expected to score, has 13, like you get those auxiliary pieces like we talked about. And then 3 other players in double figures, there's your ballgame. That's how it happens.
Prince with 8 assists, too.
Yes.
That's huge.
And her injury, you nailed it. Her injury, you nailed it. I mean, that is a huge – can they get around it? For sure, but are they the best version of themselves if she's out for an extended period of time? No, of course not. I mean, we've seen that with all these teams in the Big Ten. You lose an important piece. And her injury, not exactly the same. I don't know exactly what it is, but the situation – identical to Mara Braun on the Gopher side of things. Mackenzie running into Mara on a late 3-pointer, and there goes her last 2 seasons. Like, it's just crazy. That was noticed in Minneapolis. I can promise you that. the circumstances of that injury were not missed in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Well, it's not a good time for the injury. Let me just pop this up here. And actually, never mind. Hold on. I got to download it from my Canva here, but I made a resume chart for the quote unquote bubble teams in the Big Ten right now. And Nebraska has been trending in the wrong direction. They're absolutely on the bubble right now. It's going to be very interesting to see where they wind up. But this injury is not at a good time if she is out for any extended period of time, because now you've got 3 games, let's say 4 with the Big Ten tournament,
right, to
essentially prove to the committee that we are still tournament team. Here's their resume. They've got 3 quad 1 wins, 2 on the road. That's big. That's helpful. That Maryland win's going to do a lot of heavy lifting there. The quad 2 win against Minnesota is good as well. But you can see the remaining schedule. There's not a ton of meat on that bone.
Right.
There are no quad 1 games remaining for Nebraska. You cannot lose at Northwestern. That is a cannot lose game for Nebraska at this point in the season. And then you hope you can win and hold serve at home. If they win them all, they're 11-7 to the Big Ten, 20-9 overall. They're totally fine.
It's a wrap, yeah.
If they split the home games, it gets a little interesting. I think they're still fine. But Washington's hungry. Washington is a very hungry team right now. And to have them coming into your place with maybe a depleted guard room is going to be very interesting for Nebraska. I think they're okay. That Maryland win totally changed everything, because if we're sitting here and they lost that Maryland game, they're 16-10, 7-8 in the Big Ten with no quad 1 wins left on their schedule. I would have been very concerned for Northwestern or for Nebraska.
Yep.
But at this point, I think that Maryland win is going to do enough for them moving forward.
I think you're right. And Minnesota has not done them any favors, because 10 days ago, Minnesota would have been a quad 1 win. They were right in that 28-29 area in the net. That was at home. Yeah, you're right. That Oregon one, if Prince doesn't play, that's what I would look at, because of what we talked about earlier. Oregon's guards are really good. They're just really good. And Kelly is playing at a ridiculous level right now. So it's a navigatable schedule. Certainly it's one you would think about and go, yeah, the Northwestern game, we all know you can't drop that one. That's just a non-negotiable. If you can get a split out of those first 2, having them both at home, it's probably enough. If you win all of them, I think it's a wrap. But again, the Prince injury does loom large, because she's an important piece.
All right, let's flash a couple scores up here, and then we're going to talk more bubble. Real quick, just to make note of them, Maryland did bounce back with a nice win over Michigan yesterday, 85-77. They were down early in this game as well, came back and won. And that's, again, the middle of this Big Ten. Illinois beats Nebraska, but Nebraska beat Maryland, but Maryland beat Michigan, but the Michigan beat Indiana. It's just like, it's a circle. It's just a giant spider web you can get caught up in. Really impressive comeback from Michigan in this one. Jordan Hobbs with a career high. Silas Swords with 15 points, all in the fourth quarter. They were down 7 to start the quarter. They win the game by 3. The bottom of the Big Ten, Justin, is extremely interesting, and we didn't get any clarity this week. Purdue beats Northwestern. Wisconsin beats Penn State. And Northwestern beats Rutgers.
Right.
So here we are in this cyclical mess, not only in the middle of the conference, but at the bottom. Let me flash the standings up here. This is where we sit right now. This is with tiebreakers included. So this is how it would be. USC is just ahead of UCLA right now because of the extra gameplay. But look at that red line if you're watching us on YouTube. Wisconsin is 3-12. That win over Penn State's going to do them a lot of good. I actually feel like Wisconsin right now is sitting pretty in that 14 spot. Northwestern's win last night puts them in because, Justin, we have not gotten any word on what's going on with their games that they were supposed to play in LA.
Yeah, you're right.
They're obviously not going to get played at this point.
Right.
So are they going to be non-contests or are they going to have to forfeit them?
Right.
I'm assuming it's going to be non-contest, which then leaves Northwestern, let's be honest, 2 losses fewer than everybody else in that group. So win percentage-wise, Northwestern, and I'm gonna put my hand up and say I've been calling this since it happened.
You're right.
Northwestern could sneak in here with 2 fewer losses than everybody else. Now, that being said, they have beaten Rutgers and Penn State, which gives them that leg up over them. They did lose to Purdue, so they don't have that head-to-head if that ends up coming into play. I don't know if it will if they don't forfeit those games. But – and I do want to put the clarification. I don't want to downplay the Wildfires. That's not – this is a separate conversation. There were safety concerns. I'm just a little confused why it's been over a month now. We haven't heard anything from the Big Ten about what's going to happen with those games. It's not going to impact USC, UCLA, thankfully.
Right.
It's just going to be the 2 of them battling it out. But it is going to affect who gets to go to Indianapolis in that 15 seed potentially. So very interested to watch how that plays out. All our eyes are on the 5 through 12, but I think 14 through 18 is extremely intriguing as well.
Yeah, when it's hard for me when you have the records at the bottom, like you say, that people are going to be complaining about what happened with another team.
Yeah.
But I see their point, and we said it at the time, and because USC and UCLA played games around that time, right? I mean,
Penn State went there
exactly
during that same stretch.
And so that's where I do understand the point of I get, and that it was Northwestern's call before anybody else's. Like the Big Ten basically said, I guess, even though UCLA is going to Long Beach to play a game and they're figuring it out to get their games in, I guess
if you're Penn
just
State,
not going to go. Yeah.
I would be frustrated if I was Penn. Now,
Totally.
Penn State still needs to win a game or 2 here to make the conversation worthwhile.
Right.
But if I'm Penn State, I'm like, hey, I went out there.
Right.
And we took our lickings and we came home. And Northwestern now is sitting pretty in the 15th seed. They didn't do that. So interesting conversation to be had as we go down the stretch. But how about 5 through 12? Just an absolute mess. I was putting it in a Google spreadsheet and doing a playoff predictor thing with all these different results. And I mean, if Maryland had lost last night, there was a scenario with still Indiana and Ohio State left on their schedule that they could have fallen to a 10 seed and been on the wrong side of the byline. It's not going to happen now that they won last night, but and a ton of these teams play each other.
Yes.
Oregon's going to play Nebraska. Washington's going to play Nebraska. Iowa's going to play somebody on this list. Michigan. Indiana's going to play Maryland and Michigan State. There's so much still to be decided here. Let me flash this one up. This is the Big Ten. If you're watching us on YouTube, what the Big Ten tournament would look like right now. USC the 1, UCLA the 2, Ohio State the 3, Illinois the 4. I did make the analogy last week that it's like a NASCAR IndyCar race where Illinois hasn't pitted yet. They're going to LA this week. They might take 2 losses, and that's going to change how all of this looks. But as of right now, they're the 4 seed. And then it would be Maryland the 5, Michigan State the 6, Michigan the 7 with a head-to-head tiebreaker over Oregon, who falls to the 8. Indiana's the 9 because they have the head-to-head tiebreaker over Nebraska, who falls down, and Iowa. Iowa is 10th, Nebraska 11th, and then it's Minnesota sitting at 12. Minnesota could still move their way up because their remaining schedule is there for the taking for Minnesota. They've still got Purdue, Washington, and then a tough one at Michigan State, but probably going to have to win all three of those, Justin, to get out of to get a bye.
Probably. Yeah. I was looking at your graphic there, the bracket. I love that you guys do this every week with both the current tournament standings and your own power rankings, as if any of it makes sense to either of you when you're putting it together. I appreciate that. Because it takes a lot of work to try to figure out how to differentiate all these teams. And the crazy part is head-to-heads are so irrelevant except for the specific tiebreaker. You can't say, well, this team beat this team. There's no transitive properties, right? Yeah. Because everybody's kind of beating each other.
Like a 5-way tie, it doesn't matter.
No, it's insane. It feels like my son's traveling tournaments when they do pool play and they all go 1-1. And then my son told me they had like a random number generator ready to go for like a simulation to run on some type of metrics for fourth grade basketball. That feels less confusing than this sometimes.
Yeah.
And so, but to answer your question on Minnesota, they talked about this. Don Plitzowite talked about this yesterday on the TV show that we do. Said we got to go. Like, we got to go now. Like, they've been, as you guys have talked about, with that group, the Indianas, the Iowas, the Oregons, Nebraska was in there. They've all been in the last 4 buys, the last 4 in, the last 4 out. It feels like that graphic hasn't changed on Charlie Cream for 2 months, right? It's just a matter of the order. And so, but you got to kind of win those games in that pod. And so that's why I think the loss to Oregon hurt, because that would have been a nice one to just get on your side. And, as everybody's kind of beating each other, as we just talked about. So they definitely have some more work to do. They obviously know that. If they go 3-0, then I think it's probably a wrap, just because of Michigan State on the road's your best win of the season. Yeah. That's a tough ask, though, right? Given Michigan State's probably fighting at that point for the top 4 seed, maybe even hosting if they can get high enough. Yep. So they've got a little bit more work to do for sure. And they probably need Illinois to keep winning to get themselves, back up into that top 30. But you don't want to take any, certainly tomorrow night, if losing to Purdue would be extremely damaging.
Yep.
And even Washington here at home, after they get their little bye week, a week from Wednesday, those are 2 that you absolutely have to have here as you try to stay on the right side of things.
Yeah, in case you're wondering, Charlie Cream's new bracketology today, 4 Big Ten teams in the last 4 buys: Oregon, Minnesota, Indiana, Nebraska. Washington has moved on the right side of the bubble. I don't know if they've really done anything themselves to make that happen. I think it's been more so that the bubble has struggled. Right. And so Washington is moving up because of it. I'll be honest, Justin, it's hard for me to look at that record, 14-12, 5-9, and say
that is crazy.
That's a tournament team. But I mean, they had USC on the ropes yesterday or Sunday night and couldn't get it done. They should beat Rutgers this week. Can you split the Nebraska-Minnesota trip? And then I feel like you got to get 3 of 4 here if you're Washington to feel really good about it. 2-2 might be enough. And then maybe you win that opening game of the Big Ten tournament, because they're pretty much locked up in that the first day. But 5-9 in the Big Ten. That's crazy.
Yeah, I agree with you. And they're like Minnesota are getting a lot of run out of that Illinois win, obviously.
Yeah.
But it does speak, and I know when you talked to Charlie about it a couple of weeks ago, the bubble teams are bubble teams for a reason. And if we're going by the metrics, it's hard for, when I was growing up, you're a lot younger than me. When I was growing up, there used to be such a thing as, mid-major leagues that would get 3 or 4 teams in the tournament. That's non-existent now in basketball because of how the power schools have kind of consolidated everything. And the bubble definitely becomes a power 4 really play-in tournament with the teams that are in the middle to the middle bottom. And I didn't know that their metrics were that damaging, because they've been right there the whole time too, like we were talking about.
They keep losing close. Keep losing close.
And that's why they hang around. Yep.
The 1-point loss at Oregon. That's a quad 1 win if you can get it. The USC one is a quad 1 win. They couldn't get it. They lost by 3 to Indiana. They've had their chances. In case you're wondering, the first 4 out is all mid-major schools: Princeton, St. Joe's, George Mason, South Florida.
Right.
There's only one on the right side of the bubble. It's Harvard, which I saw Harvard back in November. That's a good basketball team.
Yep. What are they,
But
17-3, something like that? I mean,
they've been terrific this
Yep.
year. Last bubble graphic is Indiana. They're kind of hanging in there on the bubble. My concern with Indiana, if there is one, is that the schedule is tough. And so if you do go 1-3 here down the stretch and you're sitting at 9-9 of the conference, there's a little bit of a conversation. But again, if Washington is on the right side of the bubble,
Right.
teams like Indiana, Nebraska, Minnesota with much higher nets shouldn't be all that worried, I wouldn't think. The flip side of it is that Indiana has a remaining schedule that has opportunity on it.
Totally.
You get two teams coming to your place in Maryland and Ohio State that are absolutely, and those are flipped, by the way. Ohio State's playing this week. But that's huge opportunity. And then to go to Michigan State, what a win that would be. And then you've got to take care of Purdue. Like that's, again, non-negotiable.
Right.
Can't lose at Purdue. But Indiana's Bahamas trip is doing them some good right now. The Baylor win is a quad one win. Columbia has been playing some really good basketball. Indiana scheduling the Ivy League this year has done them some good. With it would have been nice to have that win over Harvard, but
Yep.
The Columbia win's looking good. But you need a couple more if you can get them here on your home floor this week. So big opportunity for Indiana. But again, you put it in the context of Washington is in, not even the last team in. They are the first team in the last 4 rounds. So they're the fourth to last team in. And they're 5-9 in the conference. Like you feel like Indiana is going to be okay. And the same thing for Nebraska, same thing for Minnesota.
I would agree. And even if let's say they lost those first 3 games, you get one of those and the Purdue game, it's probably a wrap, right?
Yeah.
You're probably in. But even if you lose and they're competitive, you're not going to drop all that much. That's what's been crazy about the net, where all these teams have been. Minnesota, for example, has been 28-33 for 2 months.
Yeah,
and it's just they winning, losing. I think they went up a step. I think they went up a step after the Ohio State loss, if I remember correctly, and now have trickled back down. So there's not going to be, the only bad loss opportunity there is Purdue. We saw what just happened a couple of weeks ago. I would anticipate, or a couple of days ago, I would anticipate that happens again. But if you get one of those, especially having those two in Assembly Hall, like I think Indiana's in a pretty good spot because of what they did earlier. Yeah.
Game changer if you can grab one of those at home. It is one of the harder schedules remaining, but it is opportunity because they are two of them being at home. Here's power rankings from me and from Beachside Dalton. Not much difference here. He and I flipped Michigan State and Maryland. I think he's trying to hide his bias a little bit.
Totally. I respect that, but I totally know what he's doing.
I think Michigan State's playing better than Maryland right now.
Me too.
And so I just give them the benefit. I know the head-to-head is to Maryland, but I think Michigan State's playing better basketball right now. 7 through 9 actually felt as easy as it has been all year. I had Indiana at 9 last week, but Oregon, 2 big wins this week on the road at Minnesota. Indiana coughs. If Indiana had won that game at Michigan, I'm not moving Indiana out of the top 9, but they coughed that one away. And so Oregon jumps in. Iowa, not going to punish. I did move them down 1 just because my eye test after seeing Michigan is that that's a really good basketball team.
Yeah.
So I bumped them up 1, but you could put 7 through 9, I think, in any order you want to.
Yep.
But I do think those are 7 through 9. I think Indiana, Minnesota, Nebraska are there at 10 through 12 in some order, but none of them are like barreling down the door to jump into the top 9. Had Nebraska won at Illinois, sure.
Exactly.
Throwing them in there.
Yep.
Had Indiana won at Michigan, sure. Had Minnesota beaten Oregon, sure. But all these teams, Michigan beat Indiana, Oregon beat Minnesota, so they get to stay in there.
Yeah, I think I have no real arguments or qualms. I agree with you with what Dalton did. He's trying to be a good soldier. You guys are both very good about hiding your biases. You do a good job. I know you both well enough, even though I don't know you well, but you do a good job of making it fair for everybody. I've got really no arguments there. Yeah, if Nebraska beats Illinois and Britt Prince isn't injured, because that's the other thing you got to factor in too. Like we don't really know where they're going on this part. The Iowa one, we mentioned it when we were talking about Coach of the Year stuff. I would probably give it to Close at UCLA, and she's another example of someone who kind of built the program quietly, and now bang, you get a couple of players, you're in the Sweet 16, and you're a national title contender. I think it's a good instruction for every school that hires a coach. give them a little bit to build it, unless they're doing something crazy or stupid or criminal, obviously, but give someone time to get their footing and develop the program. And that was my message to Iowa fans in early January. It's like, did you guys think you were going to lose Caitlin Clark and just keep lining it up against South Carolina?
Yeah, exactly.
What were you thinking? And Lucy Olsen's going to take her a minute to get here. We've seen how well is Lucy Olsen playing.
Oh my gosh,
recently.
She's one of the best players in the league right now.
And so she's a killer. She's obviously been worth everything that they did to get her there. But it was really puzzling to me, the conversations coming out of Iowa City. And I know fans are crazy. That's why we love it. But they lost their all-time winningest coach. They lost maybe the best player in the history of the game.
Yep.
Probably going to take a minute or two to adjust to that, right?
Probably.
And now you see they're playing great. They're recruiting really well. Like, they're going to be a problem for a really long time, you would have to imagine. So, and even Oregon kind of navigating their way through the new Big Ten and having all their new faces and getting it figured out. Like, this is where, good coaches and good players kind of figure it out. And those, two at the bottom of your power rankings, had some bumps to start out, but you can't argue with what's happened lately.
Think about 6 through 9, Maryland, Michigan, Iowa, Oregon, how much new there was for all 4 of those teams, whether it's transfer portal or freshmen or coaching. And they're all sitting here as tournament teams in good position heading into the home stretch of the season. Pretty impressive. And for Iowa, I think there were role developments that had to be figured out.
Totally.
You think about somebody like Sydney Falter. She comes in last year for Molly Davis and plays well, gets hurt early in the season, misses some time. And I think they were trying to figure out where her role is. I think it's just do the dirty work.
Yeah.
You're going to knock down a 3 or 2 when we need it, and then go. She's been a double-double machine here lately. She and Mallory Heyer have actually reminded me of each other in the way they're playing right now.
Yep.
They're both just grabbing every rebound that's available, going to knock down a 3 or 2 that's a backbreaker, and they're going to play good defense. And Sydney Falter's figured out her role with Iowa, and that's allowed other people. Kylie Feuerbach's kind of become a really lockdown defender.
Yep.
And they're asking less of them offensively, asking a little bit more of Lucy Olsen, asking a little bit more of Hannah Stuelke, even a little bit more of Aaliyah Guyton off the bench.
Yep.
And less of the Falter and Feuerbach combo, and I think it's working out well.
Yeah, you nailed it. Falter's role is get every bleeping rebound possible.
Yeah.
She's kind of almost like a Kate Martin in a little way. Like, Martin's obviously probably a better player, but like where she's doing all that dirty work stuff. And you mentioned the higher a Falter battle for rebounds was incredible.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what Mallory had that night, but she's had 3 double-doubles here in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And it's a very good comparison. Like, those two were just wearing each other out. Like, you don't see either one of them actually get like out hustled for rebounds very often. And it was a great matchup. I mean, if you just love rebounding, like, watch that. And Falter's, and they both have picked up right where they left off after that game, but Falter's not very big either. She just is. That's such an important role, and she's playing it beautifully right now.
Every team needs one of those, and it's a difference between winning and losing sometimes is that rebounding battle, and Iowa's getting it from her right now. All right, quickly before we let you go, I don't want to keep you here too long. We're already over the hour mark. This week's schedule in the Big Ten. Tomorrow night, Oregon at Nebraska, bubble, just flashing lights, bubble game right here. Oregon at Nebraska, big game for both sides. Michigan State gets their second crack on the LA swing at USC. A good trio of games on Thursday. Hoosiers hosting the Buckeyes at 7 o'clock. Illinois is at UCLA for the start of their LA swing. But Rutgers at Washington is interesting because if Rutgers can steal one of these games, they could jump right back into the conversation. I don't know what's going on with Kaomi McMiller, but she has not played, I think, in 2 or 3 straight games now.
Yep.
So, again, that's kind of been a bit of a mystery the whole season.
Yep.
But interesting West Coast trip for Rutgers there if they could grab one of those on the road. UCLA at Iowa on Sunday. We've already seen one LA school go into Carver Hawkeye. Now, they won't be honoring Caitlin Clark for this one, but it's in that similar time slot. 2 o'clock on a Sunday. It's going to be packed at Carver Hawkeye. They're going to be ready to go there.
Indiana,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, because I'm looking at UCLA's schedule. I know you've talked about this on the podcast before, but what the West Coast teams have had to do, like, we all feel for it, right? I mean, it's crazy when you think about the travel and the time and
Yep.
and everything to go coast to coast and all of that. It's, kind of the collateral damage in a way. Like, I would watch out for the Iowa UCLA game because of who UCLA has Thursday night, late night in California. Like, I would think that's going to be a tough game, right? At least a physical game. It's going to be a battle. Obviously with the bets thing too, that's a little bit of a wild card.
Yeah.
But then, Friday they recover from that. Saturday they fly to Iowa City and wake up early and play a Hawkeye team that's going to be ready, right? They're going to be ready to go. Like, that's a really the home Thursday night game for LA into a Sunday road game.
That's
to
tough.
me is, we saw that with USC. They were down 18-1 before they'd even before they'd even seen Field of Dreams and Kevin Costner. They're already down 18-1 in the cornfields there. Like, that's an interesting, I think, little stretch there for UCLA.
They may even fly Friday. I don't remember what Oregon's travel plans are for those long. I think they might have flown in the day before when they came to play us, but they could. I don't know. Some teams do it differently,
right?
Where you play that Thursday night and then you're flying the next day, because then they go to Wisconsin after that to wrap up their final road trip. USC is done for their west to east trips, so that's a relief for them. And then as we mentioned, Washington and Oregon still have one more, as they get Nebraska. Who's that combo with? Are they just getting Nebraska?
Who is it? Washington and
Oregon. Hold on. Let me flash this
Washington
up.
comes
Minnesota.
to Minnesota. Yeah, Washington
Minnesota,
comes to Minnesota on the 26th.
So they've got one more trip. Oregon's in the middle of theirs. Washington has one more. Wrapping up Sunday, that Northwestern at Wisconsin game has a lot of value to it for who could be playing in Indianapolis, and then the back end of the Illinois trip to LA. So a lot of good games this week, a lot on the line, Justin. I put this up here that where everybody's seated, and in 2 days it'll be ruined.
Yeah.
It's going to be worth nothing after tomorrow and Thursday's events based on who wins, who loses. But
your commitment to that is admirable. Your commitment to that, knowing that it's going to be completely obsolete by the time most people
enjoy this stuff.
I can tell. That's why I love the show.
I sat through yesterday as I'm watching games on my couch. I have an Excel spreadsheet called Big Ten Standings Mess, and it's just me trying to figure out where Indiana could land, where all these other teams are going to land. It's bonkers. There were some simulations I was doing where there's a 5 or a 6-way tie at 10-8.
Yep.
So it is going to be wild. The tiebreakers are head-to-head if it's 2. And then if it's 3 or more, it's how'd you do against that group?
Right.
And then if it's still tied, it's who has the best win going forward, from the top of the league down. So let's say Iowa and Nebraska, for example, end up in a 2-team tie. They obviously split their regular season meetings. So then it goes to who has the best win. Well, Iowa beat USC. So they get the tiebreaker. There's a lot of scenarios. I don't think we'll get any deeper than that one. But I think they have 6 or 7 steps on the website of all the tiebreakers they could use. But by Thursday, this will be obsolete. I do think the top 3 do seem pretty set. I think in some order, you're going to see USC, UCLA, and then you're going to see Ohio State at the 3, barring a collapse. And then 4 through 12, put your hands up, say who knows. Right now it's Illinois, but again, they haven't pitted yet. They got to go to LA. They got to play 2 top 5 teams in the country, and they could come out of that trip 11-6, and all of a sudden they're right in the middle of the Michigan State, Maryland, Michigan mess that is the 4 through 7 spots.
Well, the nice thing is for you is you just get to drive up an hour north, to get to Indianapolis. Whenever day they say the Hoosiers line it up there, you're ready to go.
Whatever it is. I'm going to be there Wednesday anyway, because we're all going to get together. So it's whether or not we're playing Wednesday or we're having dinner Wednesday. We'll see. But I know you're probably the biggest Indianapolis fan of somebody who doesn't live in Indiana.
You've seen that. You've noticed that on social media.
We appreciate you and your campaigning for the city of Indianapolis. But I enjoyed my 2 years in Minneapolis for the tournament, but I'm stoked to bring my own car up to Indianapolis
for sure. For
do
sure.
Our own thing up there.
I'm one that I know people want to have it in one place and all of that. I get all of that, and trust me, I know Indianapolis is the greatest city to host events. We've all heard it over it. Everybody loves St. Elmo's. Let's just get that for the record. We all love it. We've all done it. It's wonderful. It can't possibly be underrated anymore because that's all anybody talks about is how great it is. But I like mixing it up. Like I am excited to get back.
Vegas will be fun. Detroit,
why not?
Never been to Detroit, so that'll be fun.
I love it. Let everybody have a chance.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. So we're looking forward to it. We're 2 weeks left in the season.
Crazy.
In 2 weeks, we'll be doing a Big Ten tournament preview episode, which is wild to think about. And then there's nobody who's going to want that off week between the tournaments more than the Illinois Fighting Illini. I have a feeling they're going to rest up in that break they're going to get. Justin, thanks so much for subbing in, man. We appreciate it. Coming in off the bench, ready to go. Our all-time #1 listener jumping in to co-host while Dalton survives the warm weather of
He's
Los
probably just
Angeles.
waking up right now, right? At the time
He texted me this morning and put his power rankings in, so he was awake.
All right.
But yeah, I told him to rest the voice. So
for sure,
we'll talk to him next Tuesday. But we will also have some special content probably Sunday morning. At some point, we're going to put something out on social media on the Dribble Drive X account. We've got the Dribble Drive Bowl this weekend that Dalton wasn't here to preview. But Indiana, Michigan State is obviously Sunday afternoon. So either Saturday night or Sunday morning, we're going to post something on socials that we'll do a deep dive. We'll put our biases, we'll bring them out to the forefront for one quick video and deep dive into the matchup there. But that's the Dribble Drive Super Bowl coming up on Sunday. For Justin Gaard, I'm Austin Render. A reminder, you can catch all our video content on the Back Home Network YouTube channel, brought to you by Home Field Apparel. And then you can check us out in podcast form on Apple and Spotify. Listening after the fact, we really, really appreciate it. Fun 2 weeks coming up in the Big Ten. Justin Gaard, Austin Render saying so long from the Dribble Drive.